In this video, we're going to show you how you can step through the execution path of a nested loop. And we're going to do this by using the developer tools in your browser. So we have jsFiddle here and HTML here with a button that on click of it, a nested loop function is called. Here's your JavaScript pane, and the defaults are language JavaScript. We're going to use pure JS as the framework and extension, but on load type we're going to use no wrap, bottom of the head section. Now we have simple CSS, and we have the output pane here. So we're going to open the Dev Tools menu of this browser by pressing F12. And this is what pops up. We have in the sources menu or menu item, we can see the code, and we want to put in an event listener breakpoint for the mouse click event. So we'll expand mouse and select click. So if we go back to the jsFiddle, and when we click now on press OK, what we'd expect is the breakpoint to kick in for the event listener breakpoints, and that's exactly what happened. So it's the line of code that it's on now is line 46, which is the on click event. So this has stopped the execution of the code. So now we can step through each line of code. So what we'll do is we can press F11 or step into next function call, which will step into the nested loop function. So click on this. Now the line of code, the execution is at line 30. We're in nested loop, and we can examine the scope of all the variables here. So at this point I and j are undefined and text is undefined, but if we press F9 and step through the code, we'll see that text now is given a value of an empty string. I and j are still undefined because they aren't assigned any values yet. But now we're at line 33 of the code. If we step again, I is assigned 0 at this point, and it's testing the condition, is I less than 2? Well, it is. So if we step again, it should go into the outer for loop. So it'll go to line 34 because that condition was met. So now these are the values here of this local scope. So step through, keep stepping. Now then line 35, we have j is undefined, so we'll step. Now j is 1, so we're going to test, is it less than or equal to 4? Well, it is. So that means the condition for entering this inner for loop is true. So that means we can go, and the next it'll step through into line 36. So line 36, we're going to change the inner HTML of the ID of the element with ID demo to be text plus is assigned j plus this value. So you can examine the scope of that variable and the values of it here. We keep stepping through the code, and at the end of that, what happens is j gets incremented by 1 at the end of the first iteration of the loop. So now you'll see that the value when you step into the code, now j is 2. So at the very end of that loop, the first execution, now j is 2. So the condition, is j less than or equal to 4, is tested. Well, it is, because j is 2, so that means this loop can iterate again, and it will keep iterating as you step through the code until the condition j is less than or equal to 4 is false. So keep stepping, examine the variables at each time, and you'll see the execution path. So I stepped through until that condition was false, and at that point the I is incremented by 1. So at the end of execution of the outer for loop, I now, when we step again, I will be 1. So that means this is tested. Is I less than 2? Yes, it is. That means the outer for loop can execute another time. So we step into it. We'll examine the values of the variables at each point. See what text is now on line 35. This is what it has as a value. Now I is 1, j is 5. We step. I is 1, j is 1. The condition is true for the inner for loop. So we keep executing the code, stepping through the code. The inner loop is going to iterate until j is less than or equal to 4 is false. So until j equals 5. And at that point, so at the end of each iteration of the inner loop, j will be incremented by 1 until the test condition there is false. Then execution goes to the outer for loop again. I gets incremented by 1. So now I equals 2, and the test condition is tested. Is I less than 2? Well, it's not. So this fails that condition, so that means execution won't go into the loop. So when we step, it should step to line 39, so the last line of code of the function, and then when we step again, it'll step down to line 46 to after where the nested loop function was called. So if we go back to the output pane in the browser, this is what was rendered to the screen.